Hi, Jamie. Glad to talk to you today.
Hey,
I didn't realize we were going to be twinning this morning.
that's so good. Yeah.
Um, I loved kind of, all of the things that were brought up on the last panel. So I think we can kind of start off, talk about Super Coffee. I think a lot of us on the call, including, Leanne was kind of just saying are really excited about this brand specifically. So we can kind of chat through that and then move back into kind of the topic at hand. But to kind of kick things off, I am a huge Super Coffee fan. I actually saw a post about it on LinkedIn and then ended up trying it when I bumped into it at the grocery store. So I am a huge fan of the brand. But I would love for you to kind of just talk about what it's been like working at a really fast-paced, growing company and kind of what has your strategy been to date?
Yeah. So I've been with the company just a little over a year, and it's about 6 years old, and it's all hands on deck. And what I love about the fast pace and just, getting our hands into it, I think we can move fast, right? We can get approvals pretty quickly. I was at a former company where the company grew pretty big and it got very corporate. And so you kind of lose that mobility of just be able to create things on the fly that you see in the moment that you need to act pretty fast. And so we had a foundational marketing team when I joined. Right before I joined, they just had our CMO, small digital team. And then throughout the year, we've brought on more people for brand marketing, data insights, and then our chief creative officer. So the team was rounding out. And I think, just keeping the team small and nimble was important. And communication was the biggest thing for us. And just thinking ahead and planning too. I think as a company that is a startup, it's a hard transition to make sure that the planning is in place. I think a lot of startups are just used to working on a fly, but once you get to a place like you become a little bit more productive and proactive if you have planning in place. And then by all means, you can still do these fun, disruptive moments that, you think ahead of just maybe if it's a month out or less than a month. And we did a couple of those. And then we also had our first national campaign that took months to prepare. But, I like the fast paced moving and just ways that you can just create amazing things on the fly and get the team all hands in and make sure you're still doing it right by all means. But it's been fun. And also too, with our sales team, I mean, just seeing the company growth as well. I think right before I started was maybe the 90th employee, and now we're about 140 people just in a year. So it's wild to see the growth. We opened a headquarters in Austin. They made some moves from New York City of moving that major headquarter down to Austin, and just seeing the brand just expand even more. It's been really incredible.
It's funny that you mentioned, what it's like to work at a startup. I think it's interesting because the benefit is you get to wear all of these different hats and
Yes.
it's, very different than a traditional established business. But I like that you mentioned you get to kind of test and learn. Have there been initiatives or kind of strategies that you've really thought, oh, this is great. We have this ability to quickly test, or have there been things that maybe haven't worked out quite to the degree, but have provided some good learnings on the back end?
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's been these moments of there's an example. We did something for National Coffee Day, and what we did is do page covers within the Seattle Times and the Boston Globe, and it all happened less than a month. We prepared it. Our chief creative officer came up with the idea and was like, why don't we just give our competitors our recipe? We're on this mission to shed 5 million pounds of sugar in the American diet. It's a big focus for the company. We just announced our ACEs campaign today with our fellow brands who are making sure that sugar is cut out of the diet. And so when we did that, we just made sure that all hands were on deck for me, for partnerships, and a lot of our investors are celebrities too, making sure that they knew it was coming and just planning on the books, but then also friends of the brand. We have our brand ambassador group. So as we were moving real time to execute this idea, our chief creative officer was making sure from a content perspective that was delivered on time, but then also we communicated everything from our partnerships to our investors, brand ambassadors, but then also through PR all at the same time. And luckily we were able to get a pickup on Ad Week. There's been, I would say through digital, I think this is you and I, Court, we're talking about this too. Like it's always like a test and learn through digital right now, right? Like there's continuously new trends. There's new things you have to test and try. And there's a lot of things through digital, we were working through our partners or just trying new things that it just didn't stick. And I think everybody's going through that right now. It's like, through TikTok or through Instagram, there's just these new trends continuously happening, and just making sure you're doing it very an authentic way of whoever the creator is, whoever the influencer is, and really making sure that works. So you're gonna fail. And I think there's the process of understanding that failure too. And there's nothing wrong with it. I think a lot of people are afraid to fail in these companies, and there's a lot of pressure to do the right thing or to nail it and make it great, especially during the pandemic. A lot of people had to pivot and change, but it's like also too, you have to learn, and to get better, you're going to have to fail, and that's okay too. But I think that the key part for that is, for a lot of marketing teams, is to take the time to learn. At Super Coffee, we always talked about how we were just moving on to the next. And I feel like so many groups and companies do that, where you don't even get to celebrate or reflect of what you just accomplished or what you did as a team. So making sure that you are taking time to process and to make sure like what worked, what didn't, and that's okay too. And there's no pointing fingers or anything. And making sure that, you're writing down the lessons and what we can do better for moving forward. So I would say digital was a big learning curve for us this year.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you say that, because I think, working on the influencer side and the social side, we always love brand partners that are willing to try out of the box concepts or something new, to keep something exciting. But I think sometimes you'll have that hesitancy in wanting to try something and fail. And I think it's interesting that we kind of lose sight of the fact that no one's going to have a perfect campaign. 100% of the time, there are going to be challenges and things that come up that we don't expect. But you're right. And kind of how do we utilize those learnings moving forward is really important too.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned brand ambassadors, and I know that's kind of a huge function of the brand and having that celebrity talent connection. And then in our conversations, you're also talking about how, this growing NIL, NCAA athlete utilization has kind of become very important for brands. Was that something that was always kind of in the back of your mind as you were developing strategy, or have you guys kind of adapted and have kind of put that on the forefront of what you're doing?
Yeah, great question. So when I first joined on, we made sure that we understood our influencer strategy and looking at what the company had already, which I mentioned our investors quite a bit were celebrities like A-Rod, we had Baron Davis, we signed on Olivia Culpo and Christian McCaffrey, and ways that we can leverage them. Now, it could get really tricky, obviously, from a celebrity status of what they're able to do and, what their agent allows them to do. So that's always tricky at times. But the one thing that we realized when we call it like the pyramid of influence. And so at the top was our celebrities or influencers. We had quite a bit of good bit of, I would say, macro influencers. So, those who have a really large audience. And then what we realized that we were missing is just the brand fans, the brand ambassador side that could really, they're highly engaged. They love the brand. They want to work with the brand. And these are more your nano micro influencers for sure. So as we're scaling that out, we worked with the platform Sidekick to help us build basically a form if people wanted to apply. But at the same time, through our customer service, we were getting so many inquiries from student athletes. And I think because of the story of Super Coffee with three young brothers who started it out of their dorm, they were all college athletes. I think they felt this connection to the brand. So we're getting all these interests from these athletes, like how can we leverage it? At the same time, with NIL, that was happening July 1st when they made that announcement that you can work with student athletes. So at that point, we were launching our campaign called Add Something Positive. And I think what the strategy of it is really making sure that you're working with people that that are going to fit with your brand, and how are you going to activate them, right? Because the last thing you want to do is bring an athlete on and just kind of have them sit on your roster. You're going to waste time, money, and energy. And, the athlete's going to not feel utilized or not going to have a great experience. So with that said, we just launched this campaign mid-June, Add Something Positive. It's all about deliver acts of positive energy. And we found this athlete that was featured in ESPN that he was using his platform to give back to a kid that he met at his Notre Dame game and to fundraise money. His goal, I believe, was $30,000. So my boss and I saw that in an article, and this is like maybe a day or two before the announcement went live, and or the NIL opened up. And so we were like, this is the type of athlete that we want to work with. Like they're focusing on deliberate acts of positive energy. They're using their platform that associates with exactly what our message and our brand is. Let's just reach out and see. And his name is Dylan Gibbons, and he was actually driving across Florida. He just moved. He started with Florida State. And I pinged him and got a DM on him, and I was just trying to get on the phone with him just to get a sense of his personality and just hearing more what he was doing. And then my boss and I were like, okay, well, once he hits to the half point, why don't we donate the rest so he hits his goal? And then we'll just leave it at that. Like if it works out, if it doesn't, totally fine. It's more about the purpose of doing something good. And so he hit his midway point. We finished it off at hitting his 30K. And then I guess his mom called and was like, hey, this company Super Coffee just donated to hit your goal. We should look into it. And then it all connected the dots. So just getting on the phone with him, it just made sense. But yeah, I think with NIL athletes, it's, they definitely connect with a younger consumer. They're so more savvy within partnership marketing and content creation and what they're doing. And it just made sense for our brand in that sense. So that was a perfect example with Dylan, but then also from a brand ambassador standpoint, we've been trying to connect more with the younger consumer. And here was this opportunity. So how did we connect the dots? So we were able to seed them product, get them engaged with the brand. There's been some opportunities of getting some content from them as well. And then supporting them. And if they want to, see product to their teams and everything else, I mean, they're boots on the ground at these college campuses, which has been really cool. So it was just really like looking at our strategy in the beginning, where were the gaps? And then obviously opportunities like NIL, you just got to focus and move fast on that type of stuff because when those opportunities come up, it's just, figuring out what works best and driving it with purpose.
Mm-hmm. And kind of piggybacking off of that, we're seeing on our side too, there's been this huge push in wanting to utilize female content creators, especially women of color, and really incorporating them, giving them a larger voice, making sure that they're getting the same type of opportunities as other content creators. Has that been kind of an underlying focus as well in kind of this brand ambassador program that you're developing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, making sure that you're still rounding out your roster of what you need. And, I think more than ever, companies are over-indexing this. I think going back to my point earlier is just making sure there's a purpose. I think a lot of companies just check the box and it's what they're supposed to do. And that doesn't make it right by any means. But I think that they don't know what to do or what was the purpose of bringing these people on. And then there's some brands who've done a tremendous job within campaigns and bringing creators in that sense of women of color and just, females overall. I think the other thing has been a big topic is making sure that you're paying them, the same amount that you're paying other creators. And I know I'm part of the Women Influencer group with Jesse Grossman, and that's been a big topic is making sure that creators, of color, females are just making sure that they're getting paid the same amount as everybody else. So I feel like that can cross over a lot of different industries as well. I know the talk that they just hosted here, Women in Marketing, was talking about, supporting women in that sense and in that culture. But yeah, I think just making sure there's a purpose of why you're using these folks and intentionally. And I think developing the partnership and the relationship with these folks to that.
We were kind of talking about this yesterday on kind of our call, because I think we like to, chat about this as well, of how important it really is to have this thought out strategy, to really be making decisions with people, have them be longer partners, and have it be very carefully selected and not kind of that one-off like you were mentioning. I don't know if did we lose you?
I think so for a little bit. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry. There's storms
no.
here in Florida right now, and the internet keeps going in and out.
Oh, no worries. I thought it was mine too. I've been dealing with fun internet issues all week as well. No, I was just mentioning that you were we had kind of had this conversation separately about, I think sometimes people realize they need to be in the space, whether it's social, whether it's just digital, or kind of just general association with brand ambassadors, and they're doing it to do it, but they're not doing it in a longer tail form where you're connecting with these people, you're really associating the brand with these people. And, like you're mentioning, if there's layers of social good and other things, really making sure that that comes out in your strategy and not just, oh, we need someone to take a picture with product and push it out because that's what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, it's just, yeah, I totally agree with that. And with you and I chatting about it yesterday, I think that's catching on more and more. And these creators just don't want to just do a one-time post. It's a lot of effort to get to know the brand, try their product, lean into it, onboarding, making sure that the content is aligned to what the brand wants. It just takes a lot of time. And obviously you want to test with the company that you're working with. But I think what brands and company side need to realize is that it's a lot of work and wasted time and money and energy on their side too. So just keeping in mind that I know for long-term partnerships, it seems like people are pulling back from that, but just still keeping in mind, you're still developing these relationships. These are business relationships at the end of the day. And I feel like at times brands do kind of do this like turn and burn with creators at times. And obviously if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and that's fine. But when it's just continuous, it's a very small world, and they want to, people talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You were mentioning that you are part of a female organization that works with influencer talent as well. And we've kind of been talking about how it's really important for you to support other women in marketing, kind of taking a step back at the topic of the panel. I would love for you to kind of discuss, how has supporting other women in marketing, was that always kind of a focus for you? Has it been something that, working at Super Coffee, has that kind of continued? And kind of, I would love any, insight you're able to provide there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I previously, before I was at Super Coffee, I was at Under Armour. Very, obviously sports industry, very male dominated world. And I was in the run and train category, and especially with running and track and field, it was all men. I was a very young female entering into that business. And, when I looked around, it was just very hard to find other female mentors around me to help me navigate into this process. And, with Under Armour in the early days, we had, quite a bit of great female leaders there, and people leave and you kind of feel lost in that journey of seeing your mentors leave. So it could be hard. So for me, I always was so thankful for those mentors in my life. And I just wanted to give back in that sense. And then as I was navigating through, entering into an industry that was mostly male dominated and ways to connect, like I would reach out to other female agents or brand leaders that, I saw even from competitors, and just be like, hey, it's great to have another female in the room. And just making sure that you're connecting together. And then, I've done some work outside the office too. I always find it very important that if you're not getting that support from an internal sense, making sure you're finding your own resources and network. So for me, in 2019, I joined this group called Renegade. And it's founded by Amy Jo Martin. And it's probably about 30 or so women that all different backgrounds. There was women who were real estate agents to executives, influencers, building their own businesses. And what I loved about that, it wasn't just, sports marketing for me. Like I could hear what's going on with somebody else, support them, kick back ideas, and they would do the same for me. It was just so refreshing in that sense. And then being from Baltimore too, it's a very small group of women there. Everybody knows everybody in the city, I feel like, and they're just amazing people. So I just, finding ways to support one another has been so key in that. With Super Coffee, it starting with 3 young males, I think their initiative is to get more females into the company. We've brought in some great leaders from, we have a CFO, Rosie, who came in from Amazon and Whole Foods, who was, leading the charge on that, came over to Super Coffee. We have Tori Hanna, who is our CMO, and she came over from Under Armour as well. So just constantly surround yourself in that grouping and keeping in check. And I just felt like at times, if I wasn't getting that support, and this is what I tell younger females too, if you're not getting that support that you're feeling and you need that connection, you're going to have to do it on your own, and that's okay. And that's totally fine. A lot of corporate companies aren't going to do it for you. And so you got to take the initiative on your own. So, you know, I feel like too, like if you're not getting that support in your company, maybe speak up to HR. Like I know at Under Armour, we built these teammate resource groups. We had a Women of Will, and it was just a great way to get women from all different departments, you know, and to come together and support. So just really finding ways to dig in that and find it and find that support.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I caught the tail end of the panel before us, and I think the universal topic has always been mentorship. And it seems every woman that works in the industry has found one or two women ahead of them to really help guide them on the initial steps. And kind of, you kind of brought this up at the end of your response. If you're starting out, for people that may be tuning in that maybe, you know, just starting out in the industry, do you have any advice? Is it joining a female organization like Renegade or something to help kind of give you guidance? Is it something where you think it's best to reach out on LinkedIn and find people that are in similar positions? Or what do you think is kind of the best route to kind of get that initial potential mentorship?
Yeah, you know, if they're just starting out, I think it's doing all those things. You know, there's going to be times you're going to reach out on LinkedIn to find a mentor, and they may not respond, and that's fine too. People are busy, and people only have a certain capacity. So don't take it personally. I think in my early years, I would take it so personally if I didn't get an email back or a response back, like, oh, I'm not good enough because they don't want to mentor me. And that's not the case. I think one of the points in the previous conversation was like, you know, you just don't know what people are going through at home. You don't know what they're going through at work. So do not take it personally. But I also think it's important just to it's all word of mouth too. Ask your friends, ask your, you know, see what your mentors, or if you don't have a mentor yet and you see what women you inspire to be, like, what are they doing? You know, what are they posting about? What are they sharing about? But yeah, I think it's important to look at those groups or whatever it is. And also too, from your industry or your department, whatever it may be, where your interests are, there's so many groups out there. And more than ever, I remember like my early days of social, you know, you kind of met these like online friends, and that's the way you connected with other women. Like I remember workout groups, and found a group, and then it was like Tone It Up, and I found friends in Baltimore. But it's so much easier now, more than ever. So I think it's just depending what your interest is, what you want to get out of it. You know, you have so many options out there, and you could just kind of dig into it and see what fits best, and do a little bit of everything, you know, and then kind of, if one group worked and one didn't, then you kind of know where you want to go next.
Mm-hmm. And how has the pandemic kind of affected? Obviously, we were used to doing a lot of these, you know, post-work get-togethers, or you were doing, you know, panels during the week or what have you. How has the pandemic kind of affected any of those types of organizations that you're involved in?
I mean, it's just like Brand Innovators, right? We are just all doing digitally, and Slack has been a really great resource too, just connecting with people, conversations, you know, I think also, as well as different media type ways. You know, I think podcasting has been really interesting in some of the groups too, where they'll talk about maybe for 15, 20 minutes, like, here's the hot topics, check it out, read about it, listen to about it. And then they would repost that through Slack. And then that conversation kind of spins off from each other. And at the same time, it's a great way to introduce yourself, to connect, whatever it may be. So yeah, I feel like through the pandemic, we've all pivoted, but it's just all virtually. It's more virtual things. I feel like in the spring thing, I mean, even this year, things were opening back up slowly and surely, but then, you know, Omicron came. So we're kind of back and sheltered, but I do feel like things with events are slowly opening up again, which is great. And then even just, you know, if you are feeling lonely, because I'm such a people person, I need that human interaction, and screen time doesn't just check the box for me for that. I think finding another person or a friend who, you know, maybe you guys are both in the similar position, but maybe at different companies, like, go grab coffee with somebody. It doesn't need to be a big event, but just to have that interaction with somebody, I think is so, you know, we kind of get stuck in our zones at home and locked into the screen, where I think it's so healthy to get out and to engage with people in person. And even if it's just, you know, 2 or 3 people, it doesn't need to be a massive event or group. And I know that people are trying to be cautious on that.
Yeah, it's, I feel like every 5 minutes you're like, okay, everything's fine, we can go out and meet people again. And then they're like, just kidding, everyone back home. Because
Yeah.
we did the same thing. We had one office get together, I think when everyone was vaccinated and things seemed kind of mild. And then obviously with kind of the developments as of late, I'm in LA, so it's kind of a hotbed at the moment. We're all kind of back to doing virtual things, but I think you're right. We did, virtual wine tastings or different things where you could still, engage outside of work and have some of that time and take a little bit of a break. Because I think this was also brought up on the panel too, a little bit of taking a break from work. I think because we're at a place right now where it feels like you're working, 20 hours a day, and having some of that me time has been really important as well.
It's so funny you bring this up, Courtney, because with the group of women I'm with down here on this trip, we were just talking about that employees don't know how to shut it off. And a lot of times your boss, your manager is like, take the time, like shut it down. Like you have permission. So why aren't you doing it? There's this pressure on ourselves that we need to be doing more. And I think it's harder than ever that you can't separate it, where we would go to an office, we would drive home, whatever the commute may be. And then like home was home, work was work for the most part. But now it's all combined together. And so, yeah, it's really hard to separate that. But I think as a person, you have to kind of take a time out of like, do you feel aligned with yourself? How are you feeling physically and mentally? And then that check-in, like, will tell you if you need to take the time and maybe you need to go on a staycation at a hotel down the street just to get away from home for a little bit, or if you could take a trip somewhere just with a different change of scenery, whatever it may be. But I think more than ever, people just want you to take care of yourselves right now. And that's like another thing is just so many people are leaving their jobs right now. They feel so burnt out. And, I think a lot of times it is companies are trying to do things to make it better, but it's like, is it the right things? Is it the most intentional things for your employees? So I feel like that could be a whole other discussion at another time, but yeah, it's a real thing that people are going through right now. But I just think if you just make the time to get out of the house, separate it, put your computer somewhere else, put your phone off, like you got to do those things more than ever now.
Mm-hmm. We're almost at time, but I usually like to end with a few kind of fun questions before we kind of jump into questions from the audience. First off, do you have a favorite flavor of super coffee? I tried pumpkin during this last holiday break, and that was one of my favorites. Do you have a favorite flavor?
I have a couple. So normally I'm a hot coffee girl in the morning. Like it's something just very ceremonial of like hot coffee in the morning, quiet. So I usually do our grounds in the morning. And if I need a little pick me up in the afternoon, it's usually our coconut mocha, which is plant-based. And then we had a blueberry latte this year in the spring. It's coming back and it was so good. It was so delicious. It tasted like a blueberry muffin basically. And that was plant-based too. So those two are like my go-tos.
Nice. I'm always a big fan of the holiday. So I was leaning into the pumpkin and then you had some of the Christmas flavors. So those were my ones to look forward to. And then kind of last, we typically end on this question. Is there something that you're looking forward to? I know obviously from a personal standpoint, it's always shifting with the pandemic, but is there something you're looking forward to both from a personal and a professional standpoint for the rest of the year?
Yeah. So I feel like 22 is kind of hit pretty hard, not hard, like heavy wise, but just a lot of changes and transitions. I feel like a lot of people are going through that right now. For me personally, I think just kind of getting back into travel again, it really inspires me to have new ideas, to refreshing thinking and to meet new people is always key. So that for me, for a personal note, like I would love to get back to travel again. And then, yeah, I'm making some new moves on the job front too. And I'm excited to be joining a group of women in the next month or so and really helping on this conversation of, employee retention and supporting employees, but also from female entrepreneurship, empowerment, ways that we can make them better and think about their self-branding. So I'm excited that there's some changes and shifts happening for me personally and career-wise, and excited to see that come to life in the next few weeks.
Yeah, travel has been a big thing for me too. I've been really itching to get back into travel. I think the hard part is that it seems like there'd be like, I snuck in one trip at the end of last year, I think before Omicron became a huge deal. But every time I think about planning, another variant comes out and I'm like, oh God, I just, But that's okay because there's I wasn't doing it as many, road trips or domestic travel. And I think there's other ways to, get out and give yourself a little bit of a break that we may not have thought about before. And seeing, I'm in LA, you could drive up to the mountain, it's not a long drive to the mountains or things like that. So there are definitely options, but would love for it to start to ease up a little bit.
I think that's a way they get forced us to try new things in a whole different capacity, and like to drive the local trips, get in your car, go to the mountains, go to somewhere that is a little bit more spacious. I know a lot of us who are in cities, like we just wanted to get outside and get fresh air and have space and everything because we've been stuck home in our apartments or condos, whatever it may be. I have a friend who, we joke around time. I think Jen, she's probably watching this right now, but we always are trying to send some new fun places that are like a little bit secluded so you feel safe if it's a tiny home or whatever it may be, like just these little gems that are more local that you would never do ever, but you're just making it happen now because you're just to a point where you're like, I need to get out. I need something, which isn't bad either because you're just trying new things in a whole different capacity, but it's definitely not a flight across the country and going to different places.
Exactly. You have agreement from the audience.
Yes.
It is. Before we dive into another question, this was something you and I had chatted a little bit about, taking a step back and looking at the brand. I think for growing brands, sometimes people will want to focus on that awareness and kind of increasing the brand's perception within the space. But then there's also always that focus with it's a catch-22. You need to drive sales, but you also need people to recognize the brand. How do you go about balancing kind of both aspects of that?
It's so key, right? Because at the end of the day, the company needs to make money, right? I think it's just really understanding, what the company needs to prioritize. I would say brand awareness is key. And when you're driving brand awareness and brand resonance with the consumer, that's going to eventually lead to revenue. And I think this is the hard part that, a lot of executive teams go through because they want to see ROI right away, right? Like if they're not seeing a dollar happen right away, especially in marketing and influencers, it's really hard to track, especially for a company like Super Coffee. It's hard because our products are literally in every grocery store now, and which is amazing. It's great. And our .com business is doing great as well. But if somebody heard us on a podcast or saw it from an influencer, they're out grocery shopping, that's where they're purchasing that product and grabbing it and grow and go, versus just buying a 12 pack online and shipping and now there's shipping delays. Like you rather just have it in the hands, So I think from my recommendation is, making sure that you're not just making it feel like a very salesy type of brand, where it feels very transactional and just pushing codes and links constantly because the consumer is going to get tired of it and they're just going to start ignoring you. I think you have to be very thoughtful in the way that when you're working with influencers and building up your brand strategy and driving brand awareness and ways to be part of that consumer journey, right? By the time they wake up, they get on their phone, what are they looking at? Is it Spotify for a podcast or they're looking on Instagram, making sure that you're part of that consumer journey. And then when they're coming off their phones or going to the gym or getting online, like what does that look like? So just making sure that you look at the consumer and obviously who is your demographic, what's important to them in that journey, and making sure you're part of those touch points every way through. And then obviously there's different ways to measure that. If it's a brand uplift or the promoter score or whatever it may be, like just seeing those results come through. And it takes time. I know for us, when we did our national campaign in June, we're just seeing those results. So that's almost 6 months or so later. It just takes time. So, I think there just needs to be this healthy balance that it's not, you want to make sure you're connecting the dots for sales, but also you want to make sure that you're doing an authentic way that gives the consumer to lean in and to care and why to purchase in that sense, because that's going to last longer.
Mm-hmm. I think also you had kind of mentioned this at the beginning. Under Armour, obviously within kind of the sports arena, tends to be very male focused to a degree. So do, some beverage brands and a lot of the fitness focused brands can kind of have this male focus within both the internal teams and some of the marketing pushes. You had mentioned that some of the owners are trying to make sure that they have more females within the brand itself. Do you feel like there's really been a push to kind of include that in your marketing? Have you guys also been doing internal things to make sure that you have more widely represented staff?
Yeah, I think the team has been focused on bringing from a female leadership. Like I said, I think when we had to bring in a CFO, it was really important to make sure she was a female in that mix. And that's exactly what they did. And we're still growing. The brand is still small, in that sense. And you need to make sure you have a balance of executives versus the people who are middle management in that sense. And then from a marketing sense, I mean, it's something we look at every day. It's so important. Our CMO, Tori Hanna, I mean, she is one of the biggest advocates for that, and just making sure that we are making sure that it's not just talking to men because we, have 3 males that started the company, but how do we evolve that? And that was a big thing. When we looked at our roster of people that are macro influencers, we saw some gaps and we're like, we need to fix this immediately. And it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was anything on purpose. I think that there's friends of the brand that just love the brand, that knew the brothers. They're all, college sport buddies. And it just, when you're growing, you're like, anybody who wants to support the brand, come on in, and I think when you get to a certain point, you constantly have to look at that roster of folks that you're working with and making sure that you're balancing out. And like I said, it's not to check a box. It has to be intentional. You have to make sure you have an activation plan that you're really thinking through, because if not, that person's going to feel it in the other end. It's not going to be a great experience, and they're not going to really promote the brand in the way that you want to. So I think that's really key to make sure you're doing those things.
Mm-hmm. I think sometimes you're right. Brands can kind of turn on autopilot and they want to make sure they're, 50% are male, 50% are female, just make sure that you have equal representation and it's not really thought out in the degree. They're just like, we don't want any PR flack on the back end from anything that we're doing. So we want everything to be split evenly, as opposed to, I think it's great to see small brands that really take that into consideration, where they're doing thoughtful selection and making sure that there's a balance, but the balance is there for a reason, or the people that you're working with are definitely there for a reason.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, it just needs to be intentional in the right capacity for sure.
Mm-hmm. I think we're almost at time. Let's see if there are any other questions. I think kind of going back to kind of the work that you're doing outside, you had kind of talked about how you're making moves and you're doing some different things the rest of the year. Do you think that this will always be something where you'll want to do some type of mentorship program in the future? Is it always something that's really important when you carry that from job to job? I think for those of us that have been very lucky to have really great mentors, I think for me personally, I've always wanted to, help younger members of our team kind of come up, because I think you're right, that's really important and can kind of set the goal when you're just starting out in the career. But is it going to be something that you're going to want to focus on when you move around?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a way kind of giving back, but also in a sense, like that's how we all get better as women. That's how our organizations get better. And I think it's just so important to make time. Like, you have to prioritize it. I feel like a lot of times we let the work just sneak in and we push, this call with this person or this meetup with that person. And, oh, I won't attend this happy hour event with these women because I got to do work. And it's like, at the end of the day, this is what's going to make you better. This is how we're going to make all of us women better, to just work together, collaborate, and just kind of be in an alliance in that sense to help each other out. But you got to carve the time. You need to prioritize it, is my biggest takeaway. So any move I do, it's something that I try to continuously keep in touch. And then there's going to be moments where like you're changing jobs and life happens and you're like, I just don't have bandwidth for this right now. And I don't know about anybody else, when you go to these social functions, like I'm so much more tired at the end of the day in person versus like being on screen. And then you just like need to recoup. So just being like, in the presence, like if you're there, put your phone away, like be fully there, have the conversations. You took the time to go there, just make it happen. Or if you're on the phone, like don't be on your computer searching and typing and emailing and all that stuff, or texting. Just making sure that you're fully present with that person, that group, whatever it be, and really prioritize that. I think that's just like, as you're growing your career, like that's just one of the things that you have to do.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I think this week has been crazy for a lot of us because we lost Monday, and I kind of felt the same way. I'm like, oh God, I really need to like stop prioritizing. Some things need to shift. I need to be helping out some more members of my team and not spending so much time focusing on emails and things. So I think that's really a great point to take away.
Yeah, awesome.